Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started. So here we are, Tom. This is actually going to be our last episode of this season one.
A year plus.
I know, isn't that amazing? And we wanted to end this season with our last episode on hope. We've done a few different topics as in the lead up to this. We've done in different orders, but faith, hope, love, and the one that we want to talk about today is hope.
Yep.
And we are looking ahead right now at the new year and looking at 2023, what that will be. And I think is an appropriate topic, hope.
Very timely, because that's been very much in short supply for several years.
I know, and
many.
Absolutely. And when there is an interesting time, isn't there, between Christmas and New Year, that week. It's this week where things settle. It's like the dust settles of Christmas, the hustle and bustle of getting through Christmas. And then this anticipation of what the year will bring. So there's this reflection of what has been and this anticipation of what could be. And I think hope is in there. Can
be.
I mean,
and we desperately want it to be. For many people, it isn't.
That's so true.
It's more hope as in wishful thinking.
Which is why I think so many people, including myself from time to time, we kind of obsess around New Year's resolution, which is really this hope for change.
Yes.
That's what a resolution would be, a hope, whether it's, exercise or diet or, all of these different things that we but I think what a resolution resembles really is it shows that there's this need in us as humans to engage with hope again.
And to go back to the tsunami of stress, that's potentially, and why, for instance, New Year's resolutions so often don't amount to anything. They're not followed through. It's because in the tsunami of stress, when we've escalated through that pattern of flight or fight, at the beginning, it starts off with stress and need. I got to get my gut, or I'm going to diet better, or I'm going to eat more nutritiously, or I'm going to do loving things for me, et cetera, et cetera. And we feel that stress and need because that stress and need wasn't fulfilled. And we lost that sense of contentment. And then that escalates into that distress and discontent, and then the avoidance and isolation, and then the resistance I don't want to deal with, defiance, anger, and not being assertive. Then we get into all those things that New Year's resolutions are often about, which are the unhealthy ways we've coped. And I'm not going to be doing that, and I'm going to be doing this, because we felt the shame and the guilt and the fear and the self-condemnation for those things that we were doing just to try to feel good because of the stress and trauma that wasn't addressed. And then escaping self-awareness, we will often get into the next stage, which is pseudo-change. It's going to be different next time. Next time is different. I'm going to change. We make resolutions and all that. And we have either hope, and that's when the resolutions find fulfillment, or it's wishful thinking. And that, I think, is when the resolutions don't amount to much.
Yeah, the wishful thinking.
Because it's just wishful thinking, and I wish it wasn't that way. And wishful thinking and hope are often tied together, but they're two very different things. Because of what's being anticipated, and looking forward, or looking backward and wishing it wasn't the way it was, and then trying to make it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into the pseudo-normal, and it gets into January and February, and then the resolutions. I resolved. And I'm not doing that.
But let's talk a little bit about hopelessness,
Mm-hmm.
because it's part of...
Because that's what undermines the resolutions.
Yes, and I think that's what people are trying to get away from,
Mm-hmm.
hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were talking just a little bit earlier before we started this episode about just the year that we've had, and, the war in Ukraine, and, these giant...
On the heels of COVID.
Dark, there's this darkness in life. And I think that, and these are just on kind of global levels, right? And then, you kind of, you get down to nations, or then neighborhoods, or then communities, or then someone's life. And then there's their own version of darkness, their own version of hopelessness, whether that is an ongoing sickness, or whether that is depression, or whether it is family situations that just keep happening. So there's this hopelessness that we're all aware of on different levels. And I think that the knee-jerk, I need a resolution for the new year, is to try and get away from the hopelessness. So can we talk a little bit about that and what the effects of that are? And I think leading to really why we need hope.
And even the season itself.
Mm-hmm.
We enter a time of year where it literally becomes dark. And it's darker longer than it's light. And I'm always struck at this time of year where it gets to be 5 o'clock in the afternoon and it's already getting dark.
Yeah.
And where in the summer, it's light well into the evening, and then it's light when I wake up. It's dark for hours before you go to bed, and then it's dark when you wake up. And I've had the experience where I wake up and I'm trying to get a sense of what time is it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the middle of the night? It's dark. No, it's 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark.
Yeah.
It could be the middle of the night. And that disorientation just of the sense of abiding in a dark
mm-hmm.
place and waiting for light.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that association of hope with light.
Yeah, and even in the...
light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and even in the Christmas story, Jesus coming to the world was... Behold, the light has come, it's
the light of the world.
Darkness. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And hope expressed in so many different ways.
So talk a little bit about hope itself, like real hope. What does it mean? Like, what does, so we don't want to, it doesn't mean this kind of wishful thinking. What does real hope mean in terms of if we're looking ahead at the new year and thinking, actually, I want to move into a place of hope. How can we get some handles on that?
Because, especially culturally for us in the Western world, it's Christmas and then that week, and then it's New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's contextualized in that experience of Christmas before and New Year's after. So with Christmas, think of children waiting for Christmas morning and Santa's arrival with gifts, and you had to believe in Santa in order to experience his visit. And add some teleportation down chimneys and into living rooms and some quantum physics of traversing the globe in a single night. A dash of cybersecurity breaches, knowing who is naughty and nice, and you have the modern Christmas experience. And then the gifts and the love and the family and the friends and all of that, all wrapped up intensely in a day and the night before. And this in the context of our cultural history. And Santa, aka Good Saint Nick, was actually Saint Nicholas of Myra, the progenitor of the communal gift-giving, loving personage. conflated with medieval Celtic beliefs and elves and the Christianization of nature worship and evergreen and holly and boughs of greenery and mistletoe, and you throw in some, not just some, a whole lot of commercialism, and you have Santa and Christmas, and it's all pure gold. Mm-hmm. And it's everything we hope for and everything we've longed for. And it's the culmination of all that. Mm. And that comes at the darkest time of the year.
Yeah, interesting.
When you literally don't have light. And even things like seasonal affective disorder and anxiety and depression have the soil to add to the darkness of the environment, along with the disappointment of not getting what you longed for Christmas. And
there is that sinking feeling, I think. I have this most Christmas, it's so exciting, and, especially when you've got kids around, and, it's all that you kind of get through it. And then there's this moment on Christmas Day or later on in the day where you kind of think, oh, is this it? And then what next, And I think that's why, people start thinking about resolutions, because it's like, okay, now I need to fix my attention on
my life.
Yeah, and think through what's more hopeful than Christmas.
Yes, and we want to take it to the next level and carry it over into a new year.
Yes.
So that the last year is not replicated in different ways. And at the darkest time of the year, what is it that we want? Light. And hope is light.
Yeah.
Personified. Hope in the Hebrew, yachal, patiently waiting in anticipation. And how descriptive of that was with God as the creator and the loving giver of life and love. Talk about a lead up to Christmas. Santa's coming to town, and all these gifts and being together with family and loved ones and friends. And then there's that hope of a new beginning that comes from, and we think should come from, all that love and giving and receiving. And that new beginning after the darkness lifts, and it begins to lift. And it does. We hit the darkest time of the year, and we know that spring is coming. And there is hope. And hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
Somebody once said.
I mean, I think it's interesting, even in the seasons that we have, it's almost built into the creative seasonal cycle that hope is around the corner with spring, and we see new life, and we see the cycles of death and life through just trees, or
writ large, just in the environment and nature itself, and in the nature of our lives and relationships.
And so hope really is this patient anticipation of good, of life.
Yes. So what's interesting is that hope in Greek, elpis, is related to the word for faith or trust, pistis. And
we talked about that in a prior episode.
Yes, we did. And the spirit of hope in Greek mythology was personified and depicted as a young woman carrying flowers or a horn of plenty in her hands. And it's that anticipation, again, of the of what is going to be planted, what is going to be harvested in the coming year, and then celebrated in the giving and sharing and that sort of thing. So that young woman carrying flowers or a horn of plenty was the personification of the spirit of hope. The followers of Christ adopted the word to express their own experience of hope in God. Sort of an exchange of a young woman carrying fruit and flowers for a man carrying the hope of eternal life.
Yeah.
But fruit and flowers, life. It's all about life. And life where there has been death, and vitality where there has been a lack thereof. And so remember when we talked about Pandora in an earlier episode on stress and trauma?
Yes. That was a while ago now.
That has been a very long time, and that was very early on that we talked about Pandora. Well, hope is where, curiously, it comes full circle. Because, for instance, we talked about Pandora, we talked about the fall of human beings, Adam and Eve, and hope died when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of deciding, oh, we know what's beneficial and we know what's not and detrimental, and getting them mixed up. And so many times we think something is beneficial when it's actually detrimental. And we think something's detrimental when it's actually beneficial. And hope takes a hit when we confuse the two of those. So with Adam and Eve and their confusion over that and their choices and decision making, it ruined the chances of human beings getting to live in paradise. Paradise lost. And people despaired when Pandora lifted the lid on her box of horrors and evils and poured all of that out into the world. Everything that is except one thing that stayed in Pandora's box. It's just a really curious thing.
What was the one thing?
We think of Pandora's box and the opening of it and all the evils and everything else. And, the Cradle of Life or whatever that movie was about Pandora's box. And it's always depicted as being opened and all these horrors come out. But originally, there was one thing that stayed in the box. And what that one thing was hope.
Wow.
Hope didn't come out of Pandora's box.
So she let everything out that was horrific.
Yes.
But the hope was that it stayed in.
Put the lid on it.
Wow.
So originally, before that, hope was an essential part of stress and trauma. But not with Pandora's box. Hope stayed in the box. And mythologically speaking, mingled with all the stress and trauma before Pandora got involved was hope. A natural function of that.
Wow.
And sort of the Eastern idea of out of crisis comes opportunity. But when Pandora gave her little gift to the Greek world, she made sure that the one thing that could make it all bearable did not emerge, and that was hope. It's just a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it is. And I wonder, because you're so right, actually, even with darkness, what we're used to, if we have hope within it, or stuff that's hard can actually come through and bear some good things.
It's why I talk about productive pain.
Yes, but actually, how demoralizing to have all the horrors in the world and then keep a lid on hope.
Yes.
Which is kind of showing how important it is.
A critical aspect of our experience of stress and trauma. We can bear things. We can bear up under the worst conditions if we have hope. If we just have that light at the end of the tunnel, we can get through the tunnel. We can manage to survive in the tunnel. But without hope, it's just all despair. It's just pointless. It's why hope is why I talk about productive pain. There isn't such a thing as no pain in life.
Yeah.
Nobody gets to experience life that way. But is that pain simply unproductive? Even our bodies are wired for productive pain. It's a curious thing physiologically that pain is a way that the brain can signal the body to create new cells. Where there has been injury or accident in the healing process, it hurts and there is pain because the pain is the way the brain signals the body, okay, let's create new cells. Let's create new life to heal that injury. And
it's making me laugh because right now both of us
yes.
are sat here with twinged backs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I hurt my back about a week ago and it's taken a while, and you fell off a ladder yesterday.
Well, and think about the context for both of those maladies and injuries that we've got. You were trying to get some exercise and weights, I think.
Yeah, I was trying to do a workout with my core muscles, and instead I pulled a muscle in my back.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of life's, like working out, life stress, like trying hard to make things happen, to improve.
Yes.
Yeah, and what were you
And
doing, Tom? Tell us about that.
I was out. I'd gotten the Christmas tree up, and I was decorating for Christmas, and I was going to put some things while there was still some light before it got dark. I was going to put some greenery on the house, and decided, well, I'll just not get out the ladder. And so from my steps, I put a step stool, and I was on the step stool, and I was reaching, and
I shouldn't laugh.
Step stool slid off, and I went backwards, landed on my back, and conked my head. Yes, I'm fine. Everything is okay, but I'm living with that. So, yeah, but my brain is creating pain to signal the body to create new cells. And I can appreciate the pain, not be upset and resent it and all of that. And it slows us down, and maybe we make better decisions next time.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead and get out the ladder.
Maybe don't like do a 10-pound weight. Maybe start with a 3-pound weight.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, but I think
it's the idea that pain can be productive.
Yeah, and that's so true. But I do think, and that's, I mean, we've talked about that before, and it's such an important concept to get our heads around, because then we can actually, instead of running away from pain, which is what I think we all tend to do, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain or trauma pain or whatever it is, there is this tendency in us, I think, to run away. But actually, pain can be very beneficial. So that's that. But on the topic of hope, I think, just in my experience, I'm just thinking as we're chatting, Tom, just some of the encounters I've had this year with people, and there's these little interactions that I've had with people where I've just, someone's been struggling, and I've just shared this little encouragement, and they've come back to me and they said, Ruth, I really needed that. Like I needed that hope. And I was just thinking about how much we need hope. Like it's so important for us. And, it literally keeps people holding on at times, when if without hope, it would just be too difficult. So talk a little bit more about that.
Hope is the antidote for the negative anticipation.
Wow.
Remember in the past I've talked about negative anticipation. We get that stress and need, and then that goes into distress and discontent, and the distress and discontent leads us to have a negative anticipation. We expect this to get worse. This is not going to get better. And hope is the antidote to that negative anticipation. It's it's terrible and awful and nasty and brutish, but there's hope.
It could change.
It is going to change.
Yeah.
It can change.
Light is on the horizon.
And that's the difference between hope and wishful thinking. But oftentimes, without some way to actualize that and then internalize that, we simply engage in the wishful thinking and wish it wasn't this way. But that's not hope.
So talk a little bit about, we've mentioned, faith, hope and love. And we tried to do various different episodes in the lead up to Christmas we did one on faith, and we did one on love, the Velveteen Rabbit, and but this one's on hope. So can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the three, and because they're interconnected.
Oh, yeah.
And, even in when you look at scripture, the Bible, we've got that verse.
Faith, hope, and love.
Faith, hope, and love.
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about that.
And whatever order they're in, there is an interconnectedness and a necessity for all of them. Because to have something that is trusted, that is reliable, that we can count on, that we can put our faith or believe in, makes things seem possible. It creates possibility. It's I can do this because I have faith in someone, something.
So you need faith to have hope.
Human beings, we desperately long to have something we can believe in, that we can put our trust in, that we can count on, and that's reliable in a world where things seem so contrary to that. Is there something I can count on, something I can believe in, someone I can turn to when all about me is just the threads are getting pulled and it's unraveling? Or it seems insurmountable, impossible to do, to manage. And for faith, that's that someone or something that we can believe in, that's going to make things better, that makes things possible, that brings life from death, that brings peace from stress and strife. And the connection of that with love. It's not simply that I can count on and have faith in and rely on and turn to in those darkest moments. When we're challenged, when we're stressed, when we're in need. But it's also that we're loved. And there's intimacy and connection. And love heals. Love heals often where other things don't heal. And to have faith and love combined brings hope. Not the negative anticipation, not even just the wishful thinking, wouldn't it be nice if, but hope as a very positive anticipation of light where there's been darkness, of joy where there has been despair, of well-being where there has been everything but.
Yeah.
And that's hope.
Wow. I love that.
We often cling to wishful thinking because we don't necessarily really have hope. And we just wishfully think, oh, it'll be better. And won't it be nice if? But that's not hope. Hope is a positive anticipation rooted in faith and love. And New Year's and the new year can be about hope, which is essentially what homeostasis is.
Yeah.
And what activates in AHA is hope. So I really like the idea that AHA allows hope to come out of Pandora's box of horrors.
Yeah.
Put another way, AHA can bring hope where there has been negative anticipation and hopeless stress and suffering. And we can experience healing. Is it a magical wand we wave and suddenly there is no difficulties or stress or need in our lives? No, we do climb up on step stools. We do seek to improve our physical health, and there are diseases. There are challenges economically, and all sorts of things relationally can happen. As I like to say, there's no immunity to stress and need. That's just not a thing. People will do things. Things will happen. That can literally be a threat to well-being. But is there hope? Is there a way to get through? And there is.
And we see that. I think one of the things that, we started talking about looking back of the year and all of the things, all of the darkness and all of the things and all of the stresses. But, when we talk about AHA and, when you look back over the year and see the countless people that have done AHA with you or another therapist, and seen that hope. And
that normalization of stress and trauma, and then to have a tool to be able to manage that. And for some, that's somatic. Get the body normalized and in a place of optimum function. That's does the trick. And for others, there's body and mind. And the mind is a source with the seemingly rational perceptions that can really undermine our sense of well-being. Often does, which is why we have the negative anticipation. But there can be actually rational, and the brain itself with the HAPS can bring a cognitive homeostasis. And we can get ourselves out of that funk because the brain can do it. And there is a spiritual homeostasis. We are a being. We have an identity, and that is and can be so negatively affected by stress and trauma that has impacted our perceptions of our very being, that's negatively affected our identity. And there is that way through faith and hope and love that things can be on a different course. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Things can be different. We can experience life differently. Does that mean that it's all fine and we never have any difficulties? That's not being alive. There are challenges in life. And in the darkest times, there can be light.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's our message to our listeners right now as we're nearing the end of this year and transitioning into a new year, that there is light. You might be experiencing darkness. You might be experiencing weariness and stress and trauma, but we would like to say to you that there is hope.
Yes.
And that's really fundamentally right at the heart of AHA. Really what we encounter is stories of hope.
Yes.
Continually from people who've gone through it. So
yep. Not a magic wand.
Not a magic wand.
No Santa coming with gifts. No young lady with a basket of fruit or flowers. But hope. Yes. And we try to personify that somehow. And we try to personify it because it's desperately what we long for. And we do believe is possible. And so rather than personifying it, let's just live it and be transformed.
Yeah. And so, Tom, this is the end of our first season on the podcast. And we're super excited about next. We actually are very hopeful for next year for the podcast. And there's all sorts of things happening. And but we've just really enjoyed doing this first season, haven't we? Having these conversations, sharing about AHA, but then obviously these kind of strong themes of, hope and faith and love and, all sorts of stuff. And we've talked about trauma and all sorts of stuff in this season. So we just want to say to you, our listeners, thank you so much for joining with us in this space.
For being part of the conversation.
Yeah. And
letting us be part of a conversation with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we just want to wish you a happy new year. Full of hope, full of light, full of life.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.